Since legendary football coach Howard Schnellenberger left the FAU program after the 2011 season, FAU football has been searching for a new identity as well as another trip to a bowl game. Enter Lane Kiffin. So far in year one of the Kiffin era, the Owls are just one win away from bowl eligibility, which they can obtain tonight at home against Marshall. We'll discuss those possibilities, the hiring of Kiffin, the talent on this year's Owls team to keep an eye on, and much more as we go one-on-one with Chuck King, the managing editor for FAUOwlaccess.com for Florida Atlantic University football on the OFN meeting room with Greg DePalma. All right, it's November 3rd, 2017. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning into the OFN meeting room as we talk FAU football with Chuck King. Chuck, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, glad to be here. Beautiful sunny day down here in South Florida, and we're only a few hours away from kickoff as far as I'm concerned, getting ready to go to the stadium.
Yeah, and that's why I also appreciate your time. I know it's a busy day. Matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, because I know that you, I mean, from what I understand, you started up with the program. I started covering the program right around the time when they were going to just about make their move into the FBS. You were covering the program for the Boca Raton News. Is that correct? Back in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I was at the Boca News actually when the program started. I also wrote for the Palm Beach Post, and myself and another Palm Beach Post writer left the Palm Beach Post, and we started up OWlaccess.com, and we've been doing this since about 2009.
Yeah, so I used to live down there, and I had a show at Pete Rose's and in Boca, and so I got to know Coach really well. We did a whole bunch of football shows at the Pete Rose Ballpark Cafe. Spent a lot of time with Coach for those few years, including everything that was happening, and it was a really great, exciting time. I know so many people down there thought it was a joke. Oh, there's no way this is going to work. FAU, a Division I FBS program. I mean, they couldn't believe it, but Coach was. I mean, he knew. I mean, he knew what he was doing. I mean, and that's what I trusted, and I'm sure that's what a lot of other people trusted as well, and it worked.
It's kind of funny because I actually I went to high school in Boca Raton, Spanish River High School.
Oh,
and so
lifer.
When we were yeah, so when we were looking at schools, where would you consider going to college? FAU wasn't even a safety school. It was a commuter school. Nobody even considered it. So once we started this the Owl Access gig, I would get in touch with former high school people, and hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm covering FAU football. FAU has a football team? Like, what are you talking about? So people who left the area had never even conceived of it. But you're right. What Howard Schnellenberger did, and he's a master promoter. You spent time with him. You know that he can get people worked up, and he had a vision, and he made that vision work. And it's been an interesting little ride down here.
Yeah, and as I said, it's sure things have kind of been a little dormant for the program for some years since he's left, and now Lane Kiffin comes in. So I got to ask you, because everybody definitely outside the area when we heard the news, like, what Lane Kiffin's going where? And I mean, for me, of course, knowing the program, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, that's a great move. And the reason I felt it was a great move is because, and this is the way I look at it. And you tell me what you think why Lane took the job. But I looked at it as a great opportunity for a coach to kind of reinvent himself at a lower level. He's a very good coach. And when you go to the lower levels, your expertise really does stick out. And I think we're seeing that, and then he could build his reputation kind of back up, and then all of a sudden, who knows what kind of other opportunities he can get. So that was my take on it. What do you think, or what do you know is the reason that Lane took the job?
Well, I think he would have preferred to be at a higher level. I mean, he did an interview at Houston, which was coming off a pretty good season. But you're right. He wanted to be a head coach again, and this is. For all the people who look at FAU, the people who just don't know anything really about the school, or they look at the area and say, it's South Florida. There's a lot of football players around there.
Yes.
You've got a lot of talent to draw from.
Yeah.
And then you look, and then you go on campus, a lovely campus. You're 1.8 miles from the beach, as the sign on the sideline says. Uh-huh. You can entice people to come here pretty quickly, and the coaches, their wheels start turning and say, hey, listen, this can't be that hard to turn around. it's proven a little harder than some have thought. But Kiffin, you come in here and you've got some good players here already. Charlie Partridge, the previous coach, did a very good job recruiting. And then you've got Kiffin and FAU. Kiffin got FAU to bump up the salary pool for the assistant coaches, which paid huge dividends, because now they've got some guys all over the place that have been at big time programs, that have won at big time programs. And, the turnaround's been rather quick and really kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, talk about how the season started, because you had a quarterback situation where DeAndre Johnson was supposed to be the starting quarterback. He gets banged up. Daniel Parr is the week 1 starter. And now all of a sudden Jason Driscoll has taken over. So talk about, first of all, the quarterback situation and how that unfolded.
It's been a fairly strange dynamic. I mean, when FAU was going to its bowl games back in 2007, 2008, they had a guy named Rusty Smith, who later played for the Titans. But they've been kind of searching for the next quarterback almost ever since then. Jeff Van Camp had a good run. But they thought this year would be the year when they got DeAndre Johnson, who people remember him from Florida State. He transferred from Florida State after an incident in a bar, and he ended up going to East Mississippi, where he was one of the stars of Last Chance U season 2.
Okay.
So now everybody figures this guy is going to come in and be lights out. He's going to take over the quarterback spot, and he had a pretty good spring, but it was always regressing throughout the fall, and it was kind of a strange thing to watch. Now, Jason Driscoll, he started 11 games last season. Daniel Parr, he started 1. Parr is the youngest of the group, but his skill set physically is better than Driscoll. Driscoll's a very good game manager.
Okay.
So as DeAndre Johnson faded and you're looking at him like, there's got to be something wrong with this guy. But Parr missed all the spring because he had a broken foot. And so now he comes in, he's showing off his physical tools and his Baylor offense, and you're thinking downfield stuff. Well, so what ends up happening is they go with Parr. They give DeAndre Johnson a little time to run around and loosen up, so he's kind of a wildcat quarterback. It turns out DeAndre Johnson has blood clots in his arm. Had to go for emergency surgery.
Okay.
So he's out. Like, they haven't exactly said he's out for the year, but it seems like it could be a lot to expect him to come in. I mean, his future with the football team's in doubt. Football career.
Okay.
So now and then Parr goes 1-2 in his first 3 games, but he's not getting the Owls in the right offensive calls, so enter Jason Driscoll. And Jason Driscoll loses his first game, but he goes rattling off 4 straight now, which is where they are. The Owls haven't been particularly effective through the air, but he's getting them in the right position and getting the ball to the right guys and making enough plays to win games.
Yeah, and of course, the reason why the Owls are having success on offense, first and foremost, is Devin Singletary, who is just having a phenomenal season. And I mean, he was a 1,000-yard back last year as a true freshman, and he has upped up his game. He's already surpassed his yardage from last year, and he has 18 touchdowns. And that, by the way, goes along with Greg Howell, who's got over 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. So this Devin Singletary kid, tell me exactly how good he can be.
I don't know. I mean, he does things that still amaze, and I shoot a lot of the game on the sideline when I'm shooting video, so I know what I get. I know what I'm looking at when he's got the ball, but I've also got blockers in front of me and guys trying to tackle him and things like that. So I'll watch some highlights, and it's like, wow, that was a pretty good run. And then I'll go back and look at the video, the TV version of it from up high midfield. And wow, how did he make that move? He's a little guy. He's listed at about 5'10". I think he's probably closer to 5'8".
Okay.
But he's thick. So he can cut, he can stop, he can change directions, and it's probably an overstatement to say it's Barry Sanders-esque in the moves that he can make. I'm not saying he's Barry Sanders.
Sure.
But he doesn't get tackled for losses all that much because the first guy who hits him doesn't bring him down. So he can juke you, but then if you're trying to catch him from behind, you jump on his back, he'll just kind of carry you for a little bit. And with the way FAU's offense plays, they've got that Baylor offense. Kendall Briles brought it over.
Okay.
It's fast. And these defenses trying to tackle that guy, 4 or 5 times within the span of a minute and a half, wears him down. And so he's an excellent complement to that type of offense. And then when you bring in Buddy Howell's a power guy, and you can imagine how fun it is trying to tackle a power guy when you're winded and just try to stop 6 plays in 2 minutes. So
sure.
they really work well together. But I'm telling you, Singletary didn't get the ball pretty much for the first 2 games. So he only carried the ball 6 times against Navy. So he's done most of this work. Most of his 18 touchdowns have come in the last 6 games.
Wow, that's
pretty
incredible.
remarkable.
Yeah, that's and again, he's only a sophomore, so he could be especially with the rest of the season, if this team can wind up winning this conference. And right now, you take a look at the conference situation, and it's definitely a down year in the conference. So that gives a team like FAU an opportunity to be a big surprise, and we'll get more in depth into that. But I do want to ask you, as we're on offense, about Caleb Woods, because Woods was the lone big time receiver on the team last year. He almost had 1,000 yards receiving. But he was dealing with some off the field stuff. Talk about exactly what was going on there, because he just returned to the team recently. Is that what happened?
Well, he was in a fight in a bar, allegedly, and it was in January. Arrested on 2 counts of felony battery.
Okay.
It's two of the people, they were FAU students, and it wasn't a bar. It was an off-campus banquet facility, which kind of was functioning as a party type thing. So it was essentially a bar. Two students ended up in the hospital. They knew Woods was one of the guys that was involved in the incident. They said Woods was one of the guys involved in the incident. There were several persons involved in the incident. So Woods was arrested in, it was either June or July, I forget exactly, and he kicked off campus, kicked off the team, all that good stuff. Another player, by the way, Cameron Solomon, in connection with that incident, he was also suspended from the team. Both were reinstated to the school. Cameron Solomon was significantly earlier. Cameron Solomon was, I believe, the second week he was eligible to play, so he served a 2-game suspension. Woods served a 6-game suspension, came back after the bye week. Now, Woods was the leading receiver last year. Cameron Solomon was also a starter last year.
Yep.
So these are 2 guys that they were back in the spring thought would be guys that they were counting on. Now, in the meantime, FAU brought in a guy, DeAndre McNeil, a former Texas player, Duco. So he signed, and then you got John Franklin from Auburn, who was a receiver, who was also a Florida State quarterback, star of Last Chance U Part 1.
All right.
So they brought in some other receivers that they thought would be useful to kind of take their place, and they were certainly with Caleb Woods. They were not expecting Caleb Woods back, but the university reinstated him. He did the punishment that the university said. So Kiffin said, "Well, if the university says it's okay, I'm going to play him."
Okay.
And, he's played the last 2 games, started last week, and will likely start tonight.
So you'll probably start seeing more and more production out of him as the season goes on. It's not so easy to just pick up in mid-season. And go ahead.
The caveat there is that Woods was reinstated to the practice team, so he was able to practice for the last for essentially most of the year.
Got it.
But he wasn't able to play in games, so he wasn't exactly starting from scratch.
Okay.
And since both he and Driscoll started last year, there is a rapport between those two.
Okay.
It's just that FAU struggled. I mean, Driscoll completed 10 passes last week.
Yeah.
And some of those are the little the push pass snap, behind the line of scrimmage.
All right.
Push pass. So it's, most of us would consider that a run if we were really kind of being honest with ourselves. But so FAU really isn't getting the ball downfield, and they haven't had to because of things there.
That's true. And they're putting up a lot of points. I mean, look, 58, 69, and 42 over the last 3 weeks. So doing a great job even without that passing game. And then on defense, you've got a linebacker, Aziz, leading the team in tackles. So is he like clearly the top talent on that defense? You got anybody else there that we should be keeping an eye on tonight?
I don't know that Aziz Al-Shire is the clear top talent, but he's the heart and soul of that defense. And he's been amazing, getting better, throwing himself around. He missed the Buffalo game, which FAU ended up losing, and there isn't a week that goes by with Kiffin and talking with the media doesn't bemoan the loss to Buffalo. He really thought they should have won that, and he thinks that if Aziz played that game, that they actually would have won it. He's fun to watch. He's a bright guy. He's interesting to talk with, but when he's on the field, he's a menace. I mean, he throws himself around. There's a hard hit, and you look up, and it's Aziz. But they've got a talented secondary too. Jalen Young at safety, he can go after the ball, and he'll knock your head off if you're not careful.
Okay.
Chris Tooley started the season as a backup cornerback. He leads the team in interceptions with 4. Raekwon Williams is injured now. He was probably their primary corner. So Tuli is starting now. Shelton Lewis is going up and getting the ball, so they can take the ball away. They are, I believe, it's fifth in the nation in turnover margin at plus 12. And
that's
a
big.
lot of that's because they're intercepting the ball. So there is some talent there, and they're tackling better.
Who's the most? Who's got the most talent to possibly make it on the next level? Offense and defense, besides Singletary.
Well, let's start with defense since that's where we are. I want to think, I want to say that, I want to say it's Aziz, that he's a little undersized.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Jalen Young might be the most immediate guy. They have a freshman that they brought in named Zion Gilbert, who's been injured the last couple of games, but he worked his way as a true freshman into the starting lineup. And Kiffin says this is an NFL guy, no doubt, as a true freshman. So I would say probably either Jalen Young or Zion Gilbert, but those all three of those corners that I mentioned, and FAU's got a pretty good history with cornerbacks in the NFL. Cravon LeBlanc's there now, Keith Reeser, DeJon Smith, just a few of them. There's I think that tradition is probably going to carry on. You
think Aziz, because of his size, might fit into that new hybrid role, linebacker, DB, safety role in the NFL? Is that something that might work for him?
I think he could. I mean, he's such a football player.
Yeah.
Once you get, it's not like he's tiny. All right, let's not go overboard there.
Sure.
He's a decent sized guy, right? And he's got such good ball, nose for the ball, and I think there's a place for him. I don't know if he gets drafted. For his sake, I hope he does because I think he deserves a shot. But I think he'll be in somebody's camp, and I think he's going to wow people with his ability just to get to the ball. So I mean, 100 tackle. He's a 100 tackle a year machine.
And any reason to think that either Aziz or Jalen Young won't return next year?
I don't think so. I think that's really hard to do at a program like FAU. Just especially if you're a little bit, like I said, he's undersized.
Yeah, sure.
For Jalen, I mean, he can play, but those guys. I think you probably hurt your draft stock more than you help it by going a year early from FAU.
Yeah, and
and when you were asking me also about the offensive guys,
correct.
Aside from Buddy Howell, I think Buddy Howell would be having a huge. He's averaging over 6 yards a carry.
Yeah.
He'd be having a huge year if it weren't for Motor. If you look at Motor is Devin Singletary's nickname. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And you look at the body of a guy like DeAndre McNeil, or the speed of a guy like John Franklin. They're not getting a chance to show off their pass catching skills.
Okay.
They got a freshman also, Willie Wright. He's a freshman. He's a slot receiver. He's a little kind of jitterbug type guy, but he's right now in the deep threat. And Harrison Bryant is a sophomore tight end who I think when he grows into his body, when he gets a little bit thicker, he's going to be a guy that NFL scouts are really going to take a good look at.
All right. Now, what about Kiffin? And we see this happen a lot where, again, as I mentioned, you coach a program and you turn it around real fast, and then all of a sudden, especially with his name and experience, everybody wants him, and then he winds up moving on. What's your gut tell you about how long you think Lane could be here if there's success? And is someone like Briles the type of coach that would just follow Lane, or maybe if Lane leaves whenever he decides to leave, if he leaves, that Kendall Briles might be the type of guy that would take over here?
It's an interesting question. And believe me, that's become a much bigger topic of conversation around here in recent weeks. I honestly thought, going into the season, that if Kiffin won 5 games with FAU, he'd be gone. I mean, if he's coming off of 3 consecutive 3-9 seasons, he would have done his, penance, as it were, at FAU, and he would somebody at maybe a lower level Power 5 group school would snatch him up and jump at it.
Yep.
Because FAU, Kiffin's making about $1 million a year, a little bit less at FAU. FAU can't compete with the money of a Power 5
sure.
Off, right? And as good as FAU is, FAU's, I mean, how many things would have to go right for FAU to win a national title?
Yeah.
I think the best you hope for is Boise State, right? I mean, which is great, would be wonderful.
Oh, sure.
But Boise State hasn't won a national title.
That's true.
Right? So,
yeah.
But the interesting thing is with the run they're on now, they've won 5 games now already. They're one win away from bowl eligibility. They can get to 7, 8. I mean, they could end up in the Conference USA title game. They can end up playing 14 games. It could be an 8-win, 9-win team. That kind of affords Kiffin the ability, if he's looking to go somewhere else, to be a little choosy. He's got a nice setup here. You're living in South Florida.
That's true.
Hard to argue with that. There's no reason to take a job at, say, Kansas, right? Why would you go to Kansas?
Why would you do that?
When you can, because Kansas probably has as much chance of winning a national title as FAU does.
Probably.
So I think if he wants to go, and I think, don't get me wrong, I don't think he's a lifer here. I don't think anybody does. But I think that Florida job, if it becomes calling, I think is quite intriguing. Florida's going to have to decide whether 1 year of winning is enough. But I think he's looking at SEC. He would look, I would think, Pac-10 or 12 or however many teams those guys have now.
Yeah.
I think I've lost track. So I think that's where, like I said, I think he can be choosy. I think he can go to a spot where he thinks he can win a national title.
Okay.
Would be my guess.
All right.
Or a spot that he could needle Saban. I think he enjoys that a little bit too.
Well, yeah, maybe that's
where we would follow him. Kendall Briles is the name that jumps to everybody's mind right away. He's young. The offense is interesting. It's fun to watch. They've only been together a year, so I don't know how much loyalty there is between Kendall and Kiffin. Certainly there's some, because Kendall, I think, would have had trouble getting with the whole Baylor scandal.
Yep.
It didn't look like he was going to be able to find a job. So Kiffin essentially threw him a lifeline, although it was for selfish reasons. He obviously can coach. He's
sure.
helping them win.
Yeah.
FAU's defensive coordinator is Chris Kiffin.
Yeah.
Which was Lane's brother, and Monty is down here. Their father, Monty Kiffin, father of the Tampa 2.
So you think that might even be more realistic because of the name and like you said about Briles?
The improvement on defense has been striking with this team.
Okay.
You mentioned those high scoring games earlier in the year. The defense, the rushing totals don't show up. They also went against a Navy team that pounds the ball, a Wisconsin team that pounds the ball. Once they got through those teams, FAU's defense has been fairly solid. So I'm not so sure that Chris Kiffin hasn't done the better job compared with Kendall Briles.
Interesting.
And the other guy that might be interesting to watch for is Mathis, is the defensive line coach who came from South Florida.
Okay.
Kiffin has said this is a head coach in the making. He's got great South Florida recruiting ties. He's here. One of the reasons he's here at FAU is because he's still got a buyout from USF. So USF is kind of paying half his salary.
Okay, that helps.
He could be a guy that you listen to him speak and he gets you kind of fired up. So I think you might consider that too. We're speculating here, obviously.
But it sounds like, though, that we even whenever that time does come where Lane decides to leave, it sounds like you've got enough talent in the coaching staff on board here that somebody would be a really good candidate to take over. And
I think there would certainly get consideration. But the other thing that this Lane Kiffin hiring has done, it forced the university to open up their wallets.
Okay.
And in doing so, they've opened up the wallets, and now they're winning, and now they're seeing the national attention that all of this brings with it.
That's right.
Which makes you think, well, it's hard to get a more national name than Lane Kiffin as your coach.
Sure.
But but now you're spending more. You got more people within the pool of who you can choose from. So I think it becomes a more attractive job to others that are out there, and we'll know at the end of the year if there's some different names, unexpected names out there. But they're going to have. I think FAU is going to benefit because they're going to have more choices too. Should Kiffin decide to leave?
All right, now you got the game tonight, and look, I mean, from what I see here, because FAU had a really nice win against a pretty good North Texas team, even though they're in a different division, but that one was the impressive one. I was actually more impressed with that one than the Western Kentucky game, even though the Western Kentucky game was a nice little comeback late. But this game now against Marshall tonight, if FAU can win this game, then they're looking awfully good to win this division. And if they can win this division, you take a look at the other division, the West Division, and that's wide open right now. Who knows? Maybe it's a rematch with North Texas. It's unbelievable what UAB's been doing.
Yes.
So anything's possible. So I don't think it's out. I see. That's the reason why I want to talk to you, because I don't think it's crazy at all to think that if FAU beats Marshall tonight, they can not only win this division but win the conference.
Absolutely. It's funny. It's kind of cute, actually. The North Texas people are like, well, we want a rematch with FAU. Well, FAU just beat you 69-31 and played the second and third team the whole fourth quarter. It probably won't happen again that way. But is it better to get beat 50-31?
Sure.
Anyway, I just thought it was. I love college football fans. College football fans universally are immensely optimistic about the chances of their teams.
But that would be a nice rivalry, I mean, a South Florida team and a Texas team. I mean, that's
which goes back to the Sun Belt Conference, by the way.
Okay.
That's right. FAU knocked off North Texas in Sun Belt to win the Sun Belt Conference in FAU's first year.
There you go.
In the Sun Belt, there was North Texas had the essentially dynasty back then.
Yes.
So there is some history between those teams. But you're right, Marshall. This game tonight is FAU is in a succession of, is this the biggest game FAU's ever played? Kind of conversations. North Texas, all right, you knocked off the first place team. All right, now FAU's got something going. Western Kentucky, 2-time defending champ. Well, you did it on the road. All right, that's something. All right, now Marshall's won probably along with Southern Miss and maybe Louisiana Tech. The big traditional powers in the conference. FAU's never beaten Marshall in 4 tries.
Okay.
But they've come close a couple times. And yes, if you knock off Marshall, then you look at, is the Shula Bowl against FIU, surprising FIU, led by Butch Davis, of course. Is that the game that determines the East Division champion?
Yeah, that
might be.
Yeah.
Which who would have picked that going into the year?
No question, because FIU, I mean, even though they've done it until their win against Marshall last week, you just weren't really sure about where FIU was compared to FAU. But then that win at Marshall is huge. I mean, that legitimized what's going on there as well.
Yeah, what FIU did in the first half of that game was crazy to see. I thought we were watching a highlight show, and it was actually the game. But Kiffin, and it's been interesting. You wonder, is it possible Marshall was looking past FIU to get to FAU? Maybe, I guess. But Kiffin called that game a fluke. He thinks that Marshall is the best team that they're going to face. He thinks that Marshall has the best athletes they're going to face.
I think he's right.
And yeah, absolutely. I mean, Marshall's defense has been outstanding.
Yeah.
One shutout twice and held teams to 3 points, so they got that workout cut out for them. And I think Marshall's angry. I don't think you like Marshall angry.
No, you don't want to. It's not always good to play a team after they've lost their first conference game, because Marshall, going into that game last week, they had beaten everybody except North Carolina State on the road. So that was turning into a heck of a season. But anyway,
it was.
And they got Chase Litton at quarterback, and he's one of the better quarterbacks in the conference, isn't he?
Absolutely. They'll pound the ball with the run, kind of lull you into sleep, and then chase and FAU got beat a couple times by Mike White in Western Kentucky last week. They can take the ball away, but they'll also, they'll give up the big play every once in a while. And, with a defense like Marshall's, you hit a couple of big plays in the passing game, and that may be all it takes to pull it out.
What kind of a crowd you're expecting?
Man, I don't know anymore, honestly.
I mean, I know how the South Florida sports fan crowd can be. It's not easy. It's not easy to get these guys to go out. But you would hope Friday night. It's nicely located. Go to a game. Go out after that. But I don't know.
Here's the thing though, and I find this. It was confounding. FAU beat Old Dominion a few weeks back. 58 points, most points ever scored in program history, set a bunch of program records.
Okay.
Came back for that North Texas game, and there were maybe 10,000 people in the stadium. And I thought that, I was like, all right, we're going to get rolling, and then no. And then people were universally disappointed by that outcome, by that turnout. And so now you look at this game, it's a Friday night with high school football going on down here. So all the communities, how big high school football is in South Florida.
True.
So those people can't come. It's a 6 o'clock start. I don't know why TV thinks it's a good idea to kick this game off at 6 o'clock. But if you remember Glades Road at 6 o'clock, you can't get there.
Yes, I do. Yes.
So it's hard
on
to
a Friday.
There seems to be a bunch of excitement. The students, the campus stuff seems revved up. So I think the student section will turn out. But as far as, and Marshall usually travels well, so there's that too.
Okay.
But man, I've given up thinking, all right, this is going to be the game where FAU fans turn out. I think I'm kind of like, I hope it's tonight. It's a fun atmosphere, and that stadium holds noise. So it's, it doesn't take much to make it loud. But we'll see. I guess I'm hopeful, but I'm not willing to predict, 15,000 for tonight. How about that?
Well, hey, look, just keep winning, and then maybe that FIU game, maybe that's the game where back to a Saturday, that kind of thing. As long as the team keeps winning, maybe that's the game where you can get close to a sellout, or maybe a sellout. I mean, how did the crowd? How was the Navy game? I know that was also on a Friday, but
it was bigger. It was probably I wouldn't be surprised if that game ended up being the biggest game in the turnout wise of the year.
Okay.
Maybe Navy has an interest. I don't think high school football had started that week, but I could be wrong. I'm trying to remember. You asked me to remember back beyond hurricane and stuff. So
yeah,
some of that info got blown out of my head. But you're right. I think winning. I think you get the Shula Bowl. You get two South Florida teams.
Yeah, you hope
potentially
so. Yeah.
The game for Conference USA. I mean, that's kind of the stars aligning, and that may be the one. But certainly this. I think people who miss this game are going to miss an entertaining game. That's for sure.
And they're going to play the championship game. Is they play them on the home field?
Yeah, they played at the site of what is essentially record-wise the best team in the USA, and it starts with the record within conference play. If FAU wins out, that's going to be FAU.
Okay.
FAU holds certain tiebreakers over a few of the North Texas. Obviously, they would hold a tiebreaker over. So there's a pretty good, if FAU's in it, there's a pretty good chance that FAU is going to be hosting it.
Okay.
Which would be really nice for the South Florida community and for FAU.
Yeah. Well, and tonight will really dictate whether that is more than likely going to be a reality or not. And I think if they win that game, even though Louisiana Tech and FIU aren't going to be easy games, but still, great opportunity for the program, get bowl eligible, all of that into one night. Chuck, I appreciate your time. Again, I know it's a busy day, busy night for you. So best of luck, and we hope that we'll talk to you again later on this season, at least a couple more times, and definitely for a bowl preview. I'm looking forward to that.
Hey, anytime, man. This was fun.
I appreciate it. Good luck tonight, Chuck.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Take care. All right. That's once again Chuck King. And Chuck is the managing editor for FAUOwlaccess.com. So you're going to get on this network, on the Our Lads Football Network, you are going to get, we're going to talk to writers and coaches and players from schools from the SEC like we did with Georgia, to schools like we did out west like Arizona State, and then to Florida Atlantic. Iowa State, because look, maybe it's the Rutgers fan in me that always feels for the little boy, but they're every bit as important in college football as the big boy, because matter of fact, you get some of these schools, and they've got. I mean, some of these programs have some pretty big enrollments, even though they may not be in the top. I mean, you don't have to have. In other words, just because you're maybe you're in a group of 5 conference, it doesn't mean that the university is some small university in some small speck of the country that really nobody's paying attention to. That's far from the case. There's a lot of people, alums, fans, current students of these universities that are dedicated, and it's every bit as important to them that their program succeeds at that level as it is with the big boys. So that's why we're going to make sure in this program, on this network, that we talk about them all, as we do. So we'll talk more, by the way, college football a little bit later on, starting at 2 o'clock with our OFN college football preview. That's every Friday, so it's going to be 2 o'clock, and we're going to have interviews with Oklahoma State beat writers to talk about the big game in Stillwater. We're going to talk Notre Dame football, So we've got 3 interviews coming up, starting at 2 on our OFN College Football Preview Show right here on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. So check that out. Don't forget, order a subscription of your choosing on the ourlads.com website, including the Our Lads NFL Draft Preview brochure that's available right now. Follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. Check out the best college football depth charts in the business at ourlads.com. And all the content. It's great all the way through, all season long now, not just the NFL Draft, pro and college football. We'll see you next time on the Our Lads Football Radio Network, where it's never too early to think about the NFL Draft.